Hello and welcome. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to join us on TBQ Live. For those of you who are familiar with the format, we're here every second and fourth Tuesday talking about current issues, opening the conversation, leveraging the important points. So normally it's myself and Rena, but today we are lucky enough to be joined by two fabulous guests. If you'd like to introduce them, Rena, that would be fantastic.
Amazing. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. And I'm absolutely delighted to have Michelle and Emma. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Emma. Lovely to have you here. Now, Michelle is a fantastic example and role model to have with us today. She's the design and development manager for executive coaching consultancy. And interestingly, I love the way that she keeps the learner always forefront when she's designing her programs. So there's absolutely brilliant engagement. So she's very, very skilled in that aspect. And did her studies in music, right, Michelle? That's where you
that's
you're trained to be a music teacher.
Yeah.
And and then moved to London because everyone was moving to London, as she says, and then joined an organization which is the executive coaching consultancy straight from university as the team administration assistant. And then she just grew, her career grew, and is now in what we call the 7+ year career mark, which we also are calling the 7-year itch where the career is concerned. And we'll be talking a bit more with her. Absolutely delighted to have you with us, Michelle. Thank you for being here. Awesome. So now the other wonderful lady that we have here with us is absolutely an all-rounder, Emma. She's the founder of a company called Radical Recruit. And this organization, I love its mission, where they're boldly and unapologetically challenging the status quo and getting those people into jobs who are usually labeled as not being good enough. So they might have a label as being a criminal or a gang member or black or inexperienced or uneducated. And that's the kind of people that she's getting into organizations. And since they started it in 2019, I think it's about 350 odd people you've placed. Emma, am I correct?
Yeah, 380 now. And I think we'll have another 20 odd job offers by the end of the month. So he's hoping.
Fantastic.
We've done our jobs right. We will. Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Absolutely. Rocking on. Now, at an interesting juncture, she's at pre-scale-up mode. So she founded this business and she's at pre-scale-up mode. And as a founder, are having some interesting thoughts that we're going to deliberate about a little bit more. So those are our wonderful guests. Maria, shall I just crack on with the outline for today?
That would be great. Thank you, Rena.
Awesome. All right. So in mathematics, when we talk about inflection point, it's usually that point in the curvature after which the curve takes a different direction. And we don't know what that direction might be. In organizations, when we talk about inflection points, there is some disruption happening in the environment or within the processes within the organization that they need to change the way that they are operating. In individuals, and especially where careers are concerned, when they're going through inflection points, there's a disruption that might be taking place externally, but more interestingly, there's a disruption taking internally. There are certain questions that are coming up in their minds and where they need to kind of make a change. And when you go beneath those questions and thoughts, there's something good that's taking place. Because when disruption is taking place at an inflection point, it's the mind-body emotion that's signaling to the individual that they need to do something different. So for us, it's an absolutely amazing opportunity to work and have this conversation with individuals. Now, why specifically that we are looking at these two aspects, which is the 7+ years career mark, as well as pre-scale-up? Because in the corporate life, and I've had the joy of working in corporates for more than 23 odd years, there are two inflection points. The first is when people are joining the organization, where everything is new, it's a new environment, you're learning how to be a corporate employee, you're trying to think how is it that you can get your next promotion. And so that kind of keeps you busy for the first few years, and it's an inflection point of you transitioning from a student into becoming a person who's a professional. But the 7+ year mark is the second big inflection point that starts coming in. where individuals start really thinking a bit more medium and long term, and it can be quite a challenging and yet exciting moment. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that with Michelle. In the world of entrepreneurship, and the reason why we brought these two very different examples is because we'll then see the similarities of what's happening at a biological and neurological level, and yet how it plays out so differently. So in the world of entrepreneurship, there are again two big inflection points. The first is when the organization is being started up by the founder. And that's a huge inflection point because they have started off with zero to becoming and setting up an organization. But the next big inflection point is the pre-scale up mode, where the founder starts recognizing that things need to now change so that they can really accelerate and go for the climb. So we're going to have a conversation with Emma on that one, and then we're going to come back to you with an interesting, exciting invitation at the end of today's conversation. So without further ado, could I invite Maria? Would you like to lead that conversation with Michelle on the 7+ years career mark?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rena. And it's so important to know that mind-body connection, the brain was made to move us. And there are certain inflection points, as Rena was saying, in a career where things begin to change. And actually our mind and body link is going, what's next? So, Michelle, you're at the 7-year itch point.
I am.
So what's going on for you while that's happening at this moment in time? What's in your mind?
So I was reflecting before I came today, and I think what Rena's just said is absolutely true. In the earlier stages of my career, I was more concerned with the short term. What was maybe how I was going to meet my objectives for that quarter? What maybe was the next step I wanted to take? Was I even in the right industry right now, or did I want to hop somewhere else and just try something for a little while? But now at this kind of stage, I'm definitely thinking long term. I know what I like and what I don't like. I know who I am and who I'm not. I know what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at. And I find myself thinking more along the 10-year mark and then working backwards from that and asking questions in relation to that vision that I have of where I'd like to be in 10 years. And I think I also ask myself a lot about what kind of leader do I want to be? So it's not only what kind of role or life I'd like to be, but what kind of leader I'd like to be at that stage. And I think what I've been conscious of is thinking about what skills and behaviors I now need to develop to get me there, if that makes sense. And that's what's kind of going on for me at the moment.
That's so interesting because when we first transition from student to professional, you've emphasized that kind of what's the next quarter, what am I doing now, what are my outcomes, whereas what you were saying more about where you're at the moment is that sense of who do I want to be now? You kind of nailed the skills, you've nailed the behaviors. What do you want to dial up, what do you want to dial down? And I love what you said about you know who you are now. Because I think at the beginning, we discover who we are in our new career. We discover that new professionalism. So that's really important. So what's happening for you when you reflect on the past? What kind of realizations does that bring to you now in your current thinking? You know, when you're looking at this 10-year plan and you know that wonderful begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey reference, you know, you have the 10-year, you're working backwards. So kind of what would you want to share around that?
I think whenever I was younger in my career, less experienced, I didn't have to make decisions in the same way that I do now. So I think I have to consider an awful lot more. Like, you know, it could be, where do I want to live? You know, where do I want to bring my kids up? Like, and other people come into my decision making in terms of my career more than they did earlier on. So I think that's quite a big thing that, you know, and I think I've noticed as well with my friends and co-workers during the pandemic, we all kind of step back and ask some of these big questions. But I think more so for where I'm at now in my career, the decisions that I make now do have the impact on the long term. So I think I'm much more aware of the weight of those decisions. And I think what's been helpful in the past that's got me to where I am and has been a really good solid foundation for how I get further on is really working on my self-awareness. So I suppose you did pick up on, like, I know who I am. I've done a lot of work on that. I've been blessed in the industry that I'm in as well to have been exposed to an awful lot of coaching tools. Learning and development is something that's clearly important to me. I am a learning and development professional, and I prioritize my own learning and development, whether it's, I don't know, doing courses. Like, for example, I'm really excited to start on my coach training at some point this year. That's the next step for me. And I've been working towards that for a while. But even every week, I take an hour out on a Friday morning to think about what's my success has been, what have I maybe not done so well in that I want to learn from. It could even be I wanted to spend an hour on Excel shortcuts to make myself a bit more productive. So I do definitely prioritize my learning and development, and that's like a habit I've built up over the last couple of years. It's conscious because, you know, it's very easy to deprioritize myself whenever there's business needs shouting at you. But I know if you put that work in, it really makes an impact in the longer term. So I think that's been definitely helpful in the past and will see me forward. And I think as well, really considering how I work best with other people. I'm a big asker of feedback, whether it's of little things. I like, how was that presentation for you? Or how did that, you know, is there anything that I could do better next time? But even to once a year, I try and get a couple of people to give me formal 360 feedback. I know I struggled a year or two ago, pre kind of this management leadership level, with actually identifying myself as a leader, if that makes sense. People's colleague or the friendly one, you know, and I was kind of leading strategic elements, but I was finding a bit of an identity clash, I suppose. So I asked people for feedback on that, to help me understand how they were currently perceiving me, what my reputation was. And then from that feedback, and I worked with a coach at the time, I was able to then, I don't know, start putting some of that into practice and feel more comfortable with the identity I was carving for myself as well, in an authentic way. So that was really helpful as well, I think, in pushing me that bit forward, being really conscious about the identity and reputation I'm crafting to get me to be the leader I want to be in 10 years' time, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the what really stood out for me when you were talking about that is that's prioritizing self-development. Because especially in the industry you're in, where people are there to be developed, you know, as above, so below, that kind of, we need also to prioritize that. And it's not always easy to carve out and put the boundaries in and go, actually, no, this hour is for me. And there's a real courage, I think, that we get with a bit more career maturity, where it's like, give me the feedback. I'm interested to know what I'm presenting is landing, or what my reputation might be. And I think that really speaks to a courageous sense of, it's okay to get feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, because it always grows us.
And I think that role modeling is something that I'm more aware of that I'm doing. So by asking those curious questions, I'm almost giving others permission to do that as well. I think as I've got more senior, that's something that I've really been aware that I help set the culture, you know, that I want others to then follow. So I am quite conscious of role modeling those behaviors and those leadership behaviors. And I think that's also made senior leadership view me in a different way, and helped our culture for those newer or less experienced or more junior employees to kind of feel like they have that permission, or feel like they can be comfortable to do that as well. So that role modeling, it's definitely something that I'm aware I'm doing consciously.
Nice. And the thing is, we don't work in isolation, do we? You know, after a certain point, especially when we're starting our career, we're very focused on how am I doing? As we're in an organization, it's much more about how are other people doing in relation to me, And that kind of modeling behavior is so important, because that permissioning, that allowing other people to see someone being maybe vulnerable because the feedback's not been so great, or just asking, you know, how you want to be treated, what brings out the best in you, is so important.
And
So if I were
demonstrating
to ask,
trying
sorry.
as well, I think is key. Demonstrating that you're trying as well, I think, is key.
Yeah, absolutely. That real demonstration of I'm growing, I'm here to grow. You know, any corporate is going to be looking at that with such positivity. So if I were to ask you 3 tips that you would give people, or even your younger self maybe, what would those be, Michelle?
So I definitely think figuring out what are your strengths and how you can leverage them. So I know earlier on in my career, I probably was playing to my learned behaviors. There's this thing that I absolutely am obsessed with. It's called the strengths profile. So this is the language I'm using. But again, doing tools like that to give you the language has been really helpful for my self-awareness. So understanding that I was maybe playing to my work ethic, like getting things done on time and ahead of schedule and stuff, that was actually quite draining for me, whereas I love being involved in creativity, innovation, strategic planning, that sort of thing. So asking for development opportunities and volunteering for development opportunities that allowed me to play to my strengths has actually enabled me to scope out elements of my role that if I hadn't volunteered a while back wouldn't now be part of my role. So I think that's been a big career leverager for me. And
Absolutely.
then
And just to jump in there, strengths, knowing who you are, having taken a strengths profile gives you a different view of yourself, because we're not always positive about ourselves. So, you know, I think that's such a useful step. Know your strengths and start playing to them and leveraging them. Brilliant. Sorry, I interrupted. Carry on with your other tips.
And then I think actually being able to articulate them from doing stuff like this and being able to then define the kind of reputation you want to build. And this, I suppose, links to the asking for feedback thing. Being conscious about the reputation you're building, how you're working with others, and taking that feedback on board. And just not being so afraid to try new things, I think, has been a really big eureka moment for me. And then the final tip I would give people is to never underestimate the power of your network. My CEO once told me, she was like, your friends now are your clients in 10 years time. And it's very true, like not being, people love to be asked to help as well, which is
absolutely.
You can't underestimate. I love when people ask me, like today, to be able to help and come along and do stuff. And I think that networking consciously, whether it's for the here and now or the long term, and there's lots of tips and tricks and tools out there to help you with networking, and who you might need around you in your tribe, I like to call it, and what roles it might play for you. I think that's a really important thing to kind of have a fairly good idea of, maybe once or twice a year, to sit down and work that out for yourself, and to work on developing those relationships and keeping old ones alive maybe, and prioritizing them, because there's not a huge amount of hours in the day. So being strategic about the why you have those people in your network, I think that would be my final tip.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. And just jumping off that last point before we then move on to the entrepreneur perspectives, is we are social animals. Our brain works better when we are connected with other people, and their brains work better when they're connected. And actually, neural networks and social networks really, really mirror each other. And you're so right. People enjoy being asked to contribute. You know, it's one of the things that we it gives us a huge dopamine and serotonin hit as well. Thank you so much, Michelle, for your insights. It's great to see someone really leveling up and developing themselves and really focusing on their internal and external. That's really interesting. Okay, over to you, Rena. We could talk for ages, but mindfulness.
Thank you.
Over.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And I love those various elements that you're brought, Michelle. And hopefully I'll get a chance to comment on a couple as we wrap up. But for the moment, let's jump ships into another interesting world, the world of entrepreneurship. And luckily, I think for me, my background's corporate career, so I've done that for about 22 years, but I've also run my business for the last 7 years. And I can say with experience, that's a very different cup of tea. And while there are some elements or principles of neuroscience or indeed energy leadership or other aspects that are pretty much similar, it plays out in a very different way. And you're going to be hearing some of that from Emma right now. So Emma, let's begin with your first question. You are in this amazing stage right now whereby you've created your organization, you've done well, and you know that you're ready for scale up. And so you're almost in that pre-scale up mode. And I know you and I have had some really interesting conversations around it. What goes through your mind as a founder entrepreneur at this stage?
Gosh, lots of things keep me up at night. I think I feel a healthy combination of fear and excitement. And I in those moments, particularly the ones where I feel a bit terrified, I make a habit of noticing that feeling and reflecting on how it started and where we are today. So in my case, I started with absolutely no business savvy or commercial acumen, no plan, no money. I'd planned to leave my last job and start up a very similar business, a charity that put people who face disadvantage into great jobs so that they could build lives that they love. And I had this exit plan. I was going to leave that role with 6 months notice because I played a pretty important part there as a COO, and then move in and build my own sort of business. And I was found out, and they got me on breach of contract and gave me the PIP. So my career, or this business, really started because I had no other option. and with the help and advice and guidance and encouragement of my mother. So, I mean, there's always that, like, I'm constantly thinking about, well, how did it start and where am I now in those moments? And that's sort of forever fueling my ambition and my next move. Because I think if you started in a place like that, you know, the road ahead of you is going to be a hell of a lot easier to walk. So that for me is very reassuring. And they're the things I'm thinking about right now is, oh gosh, you know, I hope I don't stuff it up.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited for the future, because when I look back over the last 2.5 years, the things that we've achieved, that the now team have achieved. So I was a one-woman show for the first 12 months, quite remarkable and things to be really proud of. So yeah, both of those things come to mind when you ask me that question, Rena.
Awesome. And it's so absolutely natural. I love that play that you've done about being terrified and being equally excited. And that, I think, so does a lot of magic in a way, because it can give you the push to go even further, or it could take you down. And I think so what you do, which is really great, is anchor it to your mission and purpose about and the journey that you've thus far. In other words, what you're doing is literally shifting what we say, the PFC limbic dance that we often call out. So the whole thing about that limbic reaction of fear, you move into something which is a far more joyful, meaningful experience. So that's brilliant. And also this whole thing, that we were talking about is you start thinking about the people around you, because you're a single person at the start of your business. And then you suddenly start having people who are joining your organization or co-founders. Do any thoughts come up on that aspect at this moment when you look at scaling up?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Michelle was speaking about the importance of leveraging or building a network and leveraging it, and who, you know, today might be a client in 10 years' time. And I completely agree with that. And lots of the things that you said, Michelle, I completely agree with. I think, you know, when I first started, it was me and a whole load of wonderful humans that I plucked off LinkedIn who had recruitment experience. And these wonderful humans, you know, it was 5, 10 to start off with. And over the course of a year, we had over 300 humans volunteer to support our mission. And sort of in year 2, I got some funding that meant that I could make my first hires, and I hired some incredible people who really helped me launch the brand, and do some really important work. And I've made a couple of hires that probably in hindsight weren't the right hires, which is ironic because I'm a recruiter, although I will never admit to being a proper recruiter. I'm not a proper recruiter. But now I find myself as a member of a 7-strong team of humans that are just so incredibly bought into the business's mission, who believe in what I believe and whose values and behaviors align with my own. So I'm surrounded by great people who really support me now. And I'm having to do less leading as a result, which is a beautiful thing because they bring, this diversity of experience and expertise and different ways of thinking. And they really enable me as a leader and a founder thinking about next steps to do what I'm really good at and what I'm interested in, which is incredibly important when you're looking at sort of career longevity and, planning for the future. To have that time to do, number one, what you love doing, but also what you're really good at and what the business needs. So I'm very lucky to be surrounded by brilliant humans who are 100% behind what we're doing at Radical.
I love it. And again, just to tease out 2 really important points that you made out one is this whole thing about redefining your role at this stage. Is to almost think, what you were as a CEO or a founder is now going to be very different. And which means letting go of some of the things that you used to do in the past and delegating it to people, and it's literally like it's your baby. And it's like, oh, now I need to give it the care of the baby to many other hands. And so it becomes important to surround yourself with people that you trust, whose values are aligned to you, because it really helps you play to your strengths there because you're far more comfortable. And again, going back from a neurological viewpoint, it gives you that sense of comfort and confidence to then kind of steer ahead, because it can be quite rocky. Like you said, am I going to mess it up or is it going to be exciting? Those are the kind of thoughts that start coming in. So I love that aspect that you mentioned out there, and also about getting to know who you are. But what is at this stage, can you share any other challenge that you've experienced or any strategies that you have adopted that is going to help you in the way forward? Emma, any realizations on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges of being sort of the leader or the founder or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I don't call myself a CEO or an entrepreneur ever. That's not how I identify. But certainly as a founder of a charitable organization, any business probably. I mean, I've never worked in corporate, but you wear so many hats initially because you have to, and then as you sort of your journey goes on, because it's easier to, it's quicker to. And I've come to the realization that actually the business has grown quite significantly, and I'm not able to wear all of those hats and remain healthy and functioning and present and engaged at work. And ironically, I'm talking to you from my mum's living room in Hokitika in New Zealand. I live in London, and the reason I'm here is because I had a mini meltdown of I mean, mini. It was epic, actually. I had a meltdown. My mental health was really, really bad. And in hindsight, I now realize that there were all the signs. And it was not something that happened overnight. It was 3 years of hard graft in the most challenging of political and economic climates, and all of this stress and things that were happening in the world compounded and culminating into this absolute meltdown. And so I made the decision to come and take a break from London. And it was the first break I'd had for 3 years. I've been doing this for 3 years. And I sort of had this sort of health awakening. I realized that actually I wasn't looking after myself because I was wearing so many hats, and because there was always something to do. And just little things like eating, remembering to eat, I wasn't doing, and sleeping more than 4 or 5 hours a night, I wasn't doing, and at the right times, and having relationships beyond my work circle. I mean, they've all suffered, and thankfully I've got wonderful friends and family who forgive me and know that I'm on a mission. But all of these things that make life great to live I'd given away.
Yeah, I hear you.
So my health deteriorated, and also my quality of life, I think, has really taken a hit. And so I'm saying this now because I can breathe again.
Yes.
And I
yes.
couldn't breathe 2 weeks ago. I mean, I had terrible anxiety, and I think lots of people in business will relate to that. And I think
Yes.
it's really important to talk about. So that's why I'm saying this. But now I've just come back from a massage.
Nice.
I feel light. I had a long beach walk this morning. I ate breakfast. I've had lunch. I've had dinner. I've done some work, but not 15 hours of work. And my feeling is, that's the biggest challenge as a business owner, is getting the balance right and looking after yourself so that you can be present and engaged and be like capable of making good decisions for you and for everyone that you work with and the people you serve. That was for me the biggest challenge, I think, and being vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I'm so knackered right now. I need to stop and take care of me and be able to step away and not feel completely guilt-ridden, because that's an awful, horrible, useless feeling that serves no one.
Yeah. Firstly, Emma, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, that's such a powerful and authentic story. And whilst I know a lot of entrepreneurs experience it, every story is unique. And the way that you have handled and managed it, firstly, kudos to it. To be able to take that time out. I know people struggle of saying, if I go, then how is my business going to work? And that's when the power of the team and the network comes in. And you've leveraged that beautifully. You've gone and given yourself time away from business. Lucky you being in New Zealand right now. I'm jealous. And having massages, but full marks to you. So this is what we call the brain-body connection. And what happens is that if you, as you said, the biggest function that we as executives have to do is problem solving and decision making. It's that thinking ability. But when you have no capacity there because you're just exhausted, and in the entrepreneur's life, you're working long hours, you're doing multiple to-dos, you're watching bottom line, expenses, everything is on your shoulders. It becomes a bit too much. So self-care becomes equally important. And in fact, it's quite interesting. I'm right now undertaking a course with the MIT Sloan Executive Education on neuroscience and business. And what I loved in their first module is they've called out 5 things. And I want to share that with you because you'll see how many of those you're already doing, which really help the brain. So the first is sleep. Getting enough sleep is vitally important. I'm surprised how much of attention they pay to it. Drinking sufficient water is the other thing which is really, really important. The right kind of food, and I'm sure you're getting to eat yummy food being at your mother's place right now and really relaxing into that entire experience.
Rena, I'm actually doing all the cooking. I'm not even going to lie. But I actually really like cooking. That's like finding things that you enjoy doing. I love feeding people. Perfect.
Nice. And that's what the other ethos that's there, because the other thing is about oxygenation and simplification. So this is really kind of creating that environment when you can regroup yourself. And that's a great way to be managing yourself at that kind of pre-scale up mode. So well done on that sharing and all the techniques that you've shared. And hopefully that's going to be something which is really useful for our listeners, because there'll be many entrepreneurs out there who are really on the treadmill at this moment of time, running their business non-stop. And even when they go to sleep, it's there at the back of their mind. They're thinking about the business. So to step away, take time out is so much more effective. And I'm sure you're noticing that already. So let's come to your winning tips then. What would be your winning tips when you're talking to an entrepreneur who's at pre-scale up mode in their life? What would your tips be to them, Emma?
Oh gosh, top 3. I think, I built my brand off the business around sort of my personal brand. And And one of the things that I constantly receive feedback on is our authenticity as a business. And I think that that's really, really important to maintain moving forward. People want an honest service, and trying to find honest services is often like pulling teeth. It's not easy. So for me and my business, maintaining our authenticity will be really, really important. And I think, and just as an individual, you know, being, and Michelle talked about this earlier as well, sort of having that reputation as being someone who's honest and trustworthy. That's what people want in service providers as well. So for me, that's key to anything we do at Radical is authentic. I think, you know, our brand is built from really core values that underpin all of the work that we do, all of our interactions with customers, all of our business decisions. We know where we want to go, but what's, I think, even more important is how we get there. And so ensuring that we are values aligned in everything we do, and that our values inform all of our decision making, all of our processes, means that we will continue to provide a really good quality service that has the customer at the center of everything we do. And that for me feels really important.
Yep.
I guess the other thing that I would say is important, because we spent, when you're getting ready to scale up, even when you're starting a business, you're always thinking about like the next thing.
Yes.
And what happens, and this contributes to all of this nasty stuff that I've just suffered through, the anxiety and all of that stuff, is we tend not to stop, take stock, celebrate success.
Yes.
And I think that's okay when it's just little old you, because that can wait, you know. But when you're a leader of a team of humans, and that's who, you know, and they're good humans, you want to retain them. They're the best.
Yes.
I think the most important thing to do is ensure that people feel valued. And that, and one of the best ways to do that, I think, is to acknowledge, and if you've got the means, reward success. And part of that, I think, is about being a leader who is, I mean, for me, I'm working on this in particular, is you know, noticing all of the good stuff that's happening.
Fantastic.
and really talking about it, and making sure that people feel really valued in their roles, and they understand how their work fits into the bigger picture, and how their work contributes to the organization meeting its vision and achieving its mission. So they're the three things, I think.
Amazing. And the last bit that you mentioned, so important, because from again, from a bio perspective, literally when you're celebrating successes with your team members or helping them clarify and get to know what they're doing and recognizing them, you're spiking out the collective oxytocin in everyone's body, which is the bonding factor, which kind of generates trust amongst people, and makes people really feel kind of connected, and so important at this stage. Fabulous winning tips out there, Emma. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm absolutely confident your business is going to grow from strength to strength. We're so excited to hear your journey. I'm going to completely have a look out and watch your journey as you grow from strength to strength. Absolutely great on that one. Now, there's so many amazing. No, absolutely. Thank you for being here, both of you, Michelle as well as Emma. Now, I'm sure listeners have heard some amazing ideas, reality of what happens in the mind, some really fundamental aspects about how people can get through the inflection point and make it the best time of your life. Because as Greg said, that when disruption takes place, it can kind of really put you, out of sorts. But it is what you do during disruption that's going to carve your way forward. And therefore, some of the strategies that have been shared here are something that's quite useful. But we also have an invitation for you, and I'm going to hand it over to Maria to share a little bit of an invitation that we have for people who might be going through their inflection points and want to make the life thereafter the best that they have ever lived. So, Maria, over to you.
Thank you so much. And listening to both of you women, young professionals, it's been so important to hear about your authenticity and your journey, and the fear and excitement point, which I find really interesting, because fear and excitement, same biochemistry, depends on how you frame it. So the invitation that Rena was talking about is we are introducing a program, a 5-week program that Rena and I have put together, combining our 50 years of experience plus all of the different qualifications. Rena and I are just totally, when, Michelle talked about strengths, both of us have a learner as in one of our top 5 strengths. So we have far too many qualifications amongst us. So what we've done is we've put together a program that's a unique synthesis of all the different qualifications we have, all the different disciplines that bring together some really cutting edge tools. I trained at David Rock's Institute. Rena, as she mentioned, is doing the MIT neuroscience. Rena also is qualified in Bruce Ryder's energy leadership. I have transactional analysis, and we all know that emotional intelligence is one of the most important things. And what we're doing, this is actually for people like the young professionals we've talked to today, who are at the inflection points in their careers. It's about established professionals who kind of, you get to a point, you were talking about it, Michelle, and then suddenly you're saying, okay, what kind of leader do I want to be? Who am I? What's my reputation looking like? So it's about established professionals who kind of want to go, okay, now let's raise the bar even higher. Let's get even better. Let's leverage all this experience and expertise and take it to the next level. It's also about specialists who are then moving into that space of leading people, because that's a very different set of skills. It's also for entrepreneurs who are scaling up. And what we do is we take the cutting edge tools from applied neuroscience and cognitive skills, because now what we know about how much the brain works and what we know about how the brain works means that we can actually get the beginning of a manual. We know how to operate our OS, which is great. We also use the 7 lenses of energy leadership. We talk about emotional intelligence and regulation, because you were saying, Emma, sometimes it all becomes too much. And it was interesting that on the day that part of the Mental Health Awareness Week, you were sharing such a powerful story. So thank you so much for that. We use applied transactional analysis so that it's really practical, elegant, subtle, simple, but really effective tools. So it's about supercharging people's creativity, how you use a brain. It's much nicer to be able to be more productive in smaller amounts of time with higher quality work. And we now have the tools and the strategies that mean that we can do that. So burnout becomes less of an issue. So Rena and I are going to be launching this in the autumn. And actually what we're going to do for the next TBQ Live, we're very, very excited, obviously, because also we've worked with so many professionals. This has been a need that we are actually catering to. Both of our client bases go, I need this now. So that's what we have responded to. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So next TBQ Live, what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a bit of a deeper dive. What do we mean by cutting edge tools? What do we mean by cognitive biobehavioral hacks? What are we actually talking about? What does that look like on the ground? So we're going to be doing that next week, in 2 weeks' time. I could go on, but we don't need to, because we will take a deeper dive in 2 weeks' time. So I just want to really thank the guests that we've had today for sharing some quite so authentic and such powerful stories. The mind loves a story because that's how we all initially connected. And it's just been an absolute pleasure co-hosting today's TBQ Live. I'm going to let you say the last words. Big thank you, Michelle. Big thank you, Emma. Over to you, Rena.
Thank you so much. Absolutely delighted and very excited about the program that we are going to be launching very soon. But maybe I would just steal a quick 15-second comment from Emma and Michelle about how they're feeling at this moment of time, having shared their story and how this program might be of use for professionals. Michelle?
Thanks, Rena. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm very delighted to be asked to come along today. And Emma, I really recognise so much of what you were saying, even from my corporate experience to what you were saying as an entrepreneur. So it really sounds like there's so much synergies, even though the situations are different. And as a designer, this course sounds epic, and I'll definitely be checking it out, Rena. So thank you again for today.
And what a great point you made. You're right, because there's so many similarities, isn't it? Even though the career journey is so different of that of a corporate executive as well as that of an entrepreneur. Emma, final words from you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's when you all strip it back, we're human, right? And just trying to get by, survive, thrive, whatever you want to call it, in different types of workplaces. So really, and you actually pinched a couple of my ideas, Michelle. I'll forgive you, it's fine. I beat them. So really interesting to see the similarities. I completely agree. And in terms of your provision here, I think now more than ever it's really important because we've all gone through a crisis, and I think we'll feel the impact of that both in our business and private lives forever. And being able to cope better in work will make your life a hell of a lot more pleasant and enjoyable. So certainly a worthy investment for anyone who's listening. Thank you.
So on that lovely note, wishing everyone an enjoyable and pleasant life and a pleasant day and a pleasant week. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Michelle, once again. Thank you, Emma, for being here. Maria, absolutely a delight to co-host with you. Bye for now, everyone.